Well, hello, folks. I'm L.A. Little, founder of Neoclassical Technical Analysis, and I want to welcome you to this show where we're doing reviews of stocks that mentors have chosen. We do this once a week. Usually, we try to post it. It's a kind of a live setting, so a little bit raw, but it's from our mentors who have mastered the model, the neoclassical model. And what we do is we look at these stocks that they have found through their searches and have decided are probably the best trades they want to pursue, and we look at them and we decide if they are or not and how we would go about it. So that's what this show is. Enjoy the show, and I'll see you on the next one.
And so the market, some volume picks up, which is normal on Fed day. And we also got a decent little pullback. I'm looking at the daily chart here, and let's see if I can get it drawn out. Right there we go. Yeah, the thing that I'd note that happened today, which suggests that we're probably going to see some more downside, is we came down and hit these swing point lows down here, and we hit them with some volume finally. Now the thing that's interesting is you have this bar, which actually is this bar here, right there, which has some decent volume on it. And then you've also got decent volume on this bar here, which has a high there and a low there, right? And so when you line up those two high volume bars along with the potential break here of a swing point low, it looks to me like what this thing's going to do is try to get into this area here and then flip around. So it's anywhere from about 2,900 back to 2,953. So when I look at the S&P and I look at what happened today, it's like, okay, I could see this coming back in to this zone here. And so to me, that would probably be a decent buy. Now, if I go over and look at the weekly, the weekly is actually going to have a swing point high that's coming back to test into. It hasn't quite got there yet. So you got the swing point high to test into. You got another one over here, which is just below it, right? And then if you put the lows in, and we know that it should come towards the bottom third, where the bottom third of the highest one is about here. So that also is the same sort of area that we're seeing over on the daily. So the congruence between the two of them is good, right? And so I would think that more than likely, if this market does what it should do, we should see it try to trade back into this area. So that's kind of where the general market is. And I didn't really go through the NDX and the others, but I suspect there's going to be something that lines up that's somewhat the same between the dailies and the weeklies on those. The only one that's really been interesting of late is the Russell, like caught fire. Traded as high as 1,600 today, and then just gave it all back up, right? So it tested into this high over here, and I can point it out, but it tested back into this high, right, as it came back in where volume is there. And so didn't quite finish over it, did it yesterday, today comes back, so it's doing a retest regen off this low and should try and break it tomorrow. It'd be my guess. Well, I don't know if tomorrow, but sometime soon. So anyway, all these indexes look about the same, except for this one was a little bit different. So let's go on to some of the stocks. There's a couple of ETFs. I think I'll take those first because the ETFs generally trade with the general market more so. So what do we got here? This is the XLY, and so there's a little ABCD down, and it looks like it just completed actually. And so that one pretty much did what it was supposed to already on the ABCD structure. And then on the retest regen, it's already gone and did the full retest. Now it hit it with volume again, just like we're seeing elsewhere. But the big volume, not the big volume, but the volume, actually this is the bar, the volume zone. So it actually is a little bit more volume, not much, but a little bit more as it tested in. Now, you also got to look at the breakout, and the breakout happens to be this bar, which has no volume. So this could trade deeper on this time frame. Let's look at the weekly though and see what it shows. So if I look at the weekly, it's coming back into this retest regen. And we got another big breakdown bar that was over here, which happened to be a high as well, which is almost same price. This looks like it's going to try to trade back into here. So you might guess that this thing tries to trade a little bit deeper. What is the top? 118 here. Bottom of that one is 118.44, so almost the same. So somewhere around 118.40 to 30 would be where it tries to hit. And then I would think, you know, unless the market really craps out, I would think it tries to bounce, and then we'll see what it does after that. Right now, not a lot happening on volume. This has been one of the crazy bullish sectors. So, you know, I wouldn't hold out too much hope of totally breaking this down to start with. Because this is, I'm just trying to think, XLY. Now, one thing, you know, I guess I'll flip over here and look at this. One thing that's part of this, I think Apple ends up in the XLY now, doesn't it? Maybe one of you guys know. Matter of fact, I could find out. I could just stick it in because Apple had earnings today. Let me see where Apple lays on the. Where's my cube? Yeah, XLY. So Apple had earnings today, right? And I noticed that, like the rest of the market, this thing goes up and then gives it all back up, or it gives most of it up. So this ends up 2% when it was up something like 6% early, I think. And on the weekly, 124, 186. Today is Wednesday. So 124 divided by 3 is, what is that? 450, 40, about 40. So 80 more would be 200. So it will have hit this with volume. That's not a bad thing. So because right now it's not breaking the swing point higher, it's going to be tough to break it. But it's going to hit it with more volume. Volumes will end up slightly higher, probably, it looks like. So, I mean, this one's okay. So that will actually help the XLY some. Let's look at the other one, XLP. So XLP comes off, decent volume, comes back in. Almost all of these are lined up the same way, aren't they? Every one of them's coming back into swing point highs doing retest regens. So that area is low is 58.96. We got under it, back over it, more volume. Same scenario where it's going to try and come. Now this one's been kind of stupid up, huh? So this is 58.86 coming back into it. Just got into it. So the volume here, 84, volume here, 37. So this is testing back into this wide price spread. It's not high volume, but it's wide price spread. It's tested back into it today. Has no volume comparatively, right? So the volumes are going to end up less once you tack on the last 2 days. And even though it's a bearish structure, it looks like it's going to be hard to break this down to start with. So my guess is this one doesn't get as deep. You know, maybe you come into the bottom of this down in this area here, but you probably bounce off of that, just as the rest of the market will probably bounce. So yeah, you get a little bit more. You may have seen the lows today even. It depends. It depends on, you know, my idea here is that this, you know, whether they come into this or not, depends on if they want to rotate towards it. But it looks like a lot of the rotation's been happening already, right? This thing's been going up pretty good. So I don't know if more money will come into something that's quote unquote seen as safe or not. So I think the XLY holds a little bit better promise on the downside right now. But this one is jacked up pretty high. But it's just the structure doesn't allow it to come down too much right away. Okay, so that's the two ETFs. There's a question about Tesla. I'll take that one next. So the Tesla question was, today we actually have this on as a trade. I put a second trade on it yesterday. Is that we shorted this thing, you know, you don't see it here on the daily. I'll go back to the weekly. On the weekly, this thing started down, and it actually broke multiple swing points on the way down. And so the break was here on this bar. This was the second test as it came back. So as it was coming back up, the odds favored this thing to try to fail. The places it could try and fail were, oh, I think it was there was some stuff in here on a daily. I think the other place was here, and the last place was this retest region. So we actually had stops right up here, and this thing comes and gets within, after what, you know, it doesn't look like it here, but this is a 60% rally. So we shorted it down in this area to start with, and said at the time that we might short it higher again. So it does a 60% rally, gets within a point of stopping us out, and then we get earnings, and it flips around. So then we start getting a bounce, we short some more, and we put a tighter stop. We said, okay, this stop we'll put at 247. Well, today it got within, like, you know, 30 cents of stopping that one out. So we raised the stop this day, today, to about 257, I think it was, and said, okay, you know, we'll give it a little bit more room here. This thing's pretty hard to gauge in terms of the bounces, but it looks like we had barely survived this one. Intraday, it wasn't sure if we would. So the ideal here was, I made a comment as part of that, was, you know, this particular stock is, it's just hard to gauge. We're going to give it a little bit more, but we don't usually move stops. And what I meant by that was, you know, when you're doing your calculations, you know, and if I'm saying I'm going to short it here, or wherever it was here, you know, and then I put a stop in, I really don't want to move stops, because all of my reward risk, the size of my trade, everything is dependent on, you know, where you lay out those stops to start with. So you really typically don't want to move them. And I think at the comment I put in there was something to the effect of, we'll see where this bounce turns. In other words, where is it going to turn? And once we see that, right, then we can adjust that stop again. So in other words, if this were to turn and come back down and get back below probably this bar, which is about 223, I think, you know, then I'd be happy to bring that stop back down. And looking at the daily, we'd figure out where to put it. I don't want to leave it up here, because my risk reward is not what I want anymore. And so today was like, okay, they're giving it you know, one of these crazy bounces. We're going to give it a little bit room. I don't want to get just stopped out. I'd much rather, even if I'm wrong in this trade, I'd much rather get out with a smaller loss or a small gain potentially. And so that was the idea of what we were doing today and why we were doing it that way. Okay. All right, let's take some of these individuals. I'm going to go to UNHX, and so UNH has a big old ABCD structure, it looks like, and I'm on the daily now. Now remember, this is healthcare, and this name, if I remember right, let me go to the longer term time frame to start with. Yeah, I thought I remembered it right, but I wasn't sure. This name got pummeled, right? And so we had, you know, a big downdraft, big bounce, another big downdraft, a little bounce, and then a huge downdraft, and then volume at the bottom, and this thing flips around, does a big move back up and closes above the previous bar's low on the weekly. And then it gets the nice big rally, and then volume doesn't come in, but price does, shoots it back up, and it goes up the test here. So breakdown bars, usually you come back up to test them. They usually end up being kind of a place where people sell and buy, and, you know, if it's going higher, it will stick up there and eventually move higher. Well, this one's actually come off a lot compared to, you know, going sideways. So in other words, it goes up and tests this one instead of staying up here, right? Comes back off. So that's kind of one clue that this may behave a little bit differently than what we saw on this last one down here. Let's go back to the daily since that was where the question was. So if I go back to the UNH, we had this big push up. We have an ABCD structure now as a result of that. And it goes to right there. And, oh, maybe that wasn't. Let me go back to the question. Oh, was it on the weekly? Okay, thank you. Because that doesn't look like what I saw. Let's go back to the weekly then. So you got a big ABCD structure here as well. And this one goes to here, back down, and then back up. So it captured, looks like about 2/3 of that ABCD structure, and then got to that breakdown bar. So now it pulls back kind of heavy. You actually still have inside this now, you still have another little nested ABCD potential, right, that could fire. One of the things that we've learned with some of the work we've done recently is that something on the order, I believe, 83% of ABCD structures, at least bullish ones, I'm not sure about all bullish and bearish because we were looking at bullish first, but 83% of them tend to complete. In other words, they make it to where they're going. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But we've only done it over a few stocks over a long period of time. We need to do it across more, and we'll get that data at some point and be able to make more sense of all this statistically. But the question is like, where would you, if you're going to try and buy this thing, where would you buy it? So let's clean that up, and then let's look at it and see. Okay, so what do we got here? We got this guy. You got the big bar down here. We already got this pullback that's kind of deep, volume, nothing there. You've actually got this down here as well, and the bottom of this one here. Yeah, so the question is can you get back to here, right? Or is the buy right here? I think that would be the question. And given the way this is pulled back, my guess is what we'll see some sort of a little attempt somewhere, right, to bounce this thing that will probably fail and roll over and do a little ABCD structure to the downside, which will get you back into this area. Let me look at the daily one more time. So that would be, so that's about 238, 239, somewhere around there. Let me go back to the daily though. Let me see what the daily looks like. Okay, so to do that, your clues are going to be here, right? If the bullish retest regen can't hold, and it's in the bottom third now, which is where it should be, and that whole thing I was saying about it potentially, bouncing and coming back, setting up an ABCD structure of a downside on the weekly, this would make sense to do it. Now, the thing here is that you actually have a clue here that this thing's a little weaker than you'd like. And the clue here is that when this broke out, you go more than 6 bars before you test back into these two, right? And then you test fully, which you also shouldn't do. And so that suggests to me that this thing probably is weaker than you think, and that actually you may set up an ABCD structure. Even if this thing bounces, it may not get back over this, right? And sets up an ABCD structure to get you where? Almost down to that numbers we were talking about, right? A little bit beyond them. And so I kind of would lean towards the idea that the buy is going to be down here when it gets there, and that you're probably not going to see it hold here because it's already shown you on the daily that it's a little bit weaker than you think. That's the way I would read that one. Okay, we got two other ones here. Let's see what these are. CB is insurance company, I believe, Chubb. And it broke out, faded today, did a retest, just barely touched the tops, broke over 2 of them on a daily. All-time highs, I guess. No, just the highs in the weeklies, and coming back up to the breakdown bar on the monthly, which happens to be almost a high. Okay, so that price point, 156. Let's go back over here. Yeah, so this is a nice looking chart. This area here is a nice buy area, and it actually hit into it today. So this would be kind of like a first buy area. And the reason for that is, at least on the daily time frame, you have this wide price spread high volume bar, which as it pushes up, right, then that hesitates and then takes off and just breaks out. So you get a nice swing to the top side, right, and then 2 bars later you break it out. Now you get a little bit of a fade on market weakness with some volume. If this fades now a little bit more and volume doesn't pick up, which I suspect it probably won't on this one, that area or right down in this area is probably the nice spot to try and pick it up. At least your first buy if you're scaling in. So those price points are about 150, 151, and not much on the weekly here other than, this thing's just been climbing, right? You probably have ABCD structures all the way up here, and it looks like you do, right? So there's ABCD structures, 1, 2, 3, 4. This one here is the first one down, completes, right? I completed. Then you had another one inside of it, right? Nested, completes. You got another one inside of that. Actually, not inside. You got another one here that actually goes higher. So it goes to there, back down, just redrawn today. And another thing that we saw with the study that we did is that it was surprising, but the number of C points that redraw, in other words, you get a lower C on bullish ones, was quite high. It was like 61%, I think. And so it's not uncommon to see this happen, where you get a C point, you go up, and then you come back down and make a lower one. So that will be interesting to see when we look at more data to see if that's still true. I like this one. I think it's a decent buy on a retrace. And I believe Matt was pointing this one out. He couldn't make it today, but he was pointing this one out because it's in the XLF, which has been strong. And then the last one here is another one in the same sector, USB, which is Bancorp. It's another bank stock. This one's a bank stock versus an insurance stock. So nice big push up. I don't like these 2 bars up here at the top, right, the way they formed. So that's a kind of a negative saying that you've kind of extended more so and probably going to pull back. Got a little doji on the weekly. Got breakouts. If he were here, I'm sure he's telling me probably that he wants to try to buy a retest back into this zone. So my guess is that's what he's wanting to do. And my advice would be, yeah, that's what you want to buy. So let me see the last picture here, the monthly. Now the monthly hasn't broken out completely. It's trying to break out this week. This month. Actually, it will break out. Today's the last day. So you have a bullish here. Volume so-so. You get over the breakdown bar though, and you're right up to the top. Yeah, this all looks pretty good. So this I think pulls back. You buy it, and more than likely you test the top, try to make new highs. So that looks pretty good. Okay, well, let's turn our attention to other stuff and stop the recording.